everybody. Welcome to Abbey Research Reads. My name is Dr. Kristen Donnelly, and the book I'm going to be talking about today is Beth Macy's newest, Raising Lazarus. For anyone who has not joined us before, I am a massive fan of Beth's work. Not only her previous books, Dopesick and Factory Man, and one other I have not gotten a chance to read yet, but also her work on the show Dopesick. We covered Dopesick, the Hulu limited series, every single episode by episode on our sister channel, Abbey Research. And there's a link to that, I think, happening somewhere in the cards or definitely in the show notes. So if you'd like to know our thoughts on the coverage of the opioid epidemic up to 2006, then definitely head there. I've also done a book review of Dopesick itself here on this channel. And Raising Lazarus is the follow-up to that. Hope, Justice, and the Future of America's Overdose Crisis. I'm going to get into it a little bit, but let me say that overall, Beth's an incredible storyteller. It's a compelling book. It is a hard read for the simple fact that it's, 300 odd pages of human pain, but it is dealt with compassionately and professionally and very, very expertly. I left this reminded that solutions to complicated problems are always complicated. And if I was going to do a too long didn't read about this book, it's to remind us that addiction is a medical disease, not a criminal offense, truly at its cause. And by treating it entirely as criminal, we have perpetuated it significantly further. If we as a country could understand the medical and non-moral aspects of it, we actually have a chance at ending it, turning it around, and providing freedom for people. My experience with drugs and opioids in particular is that I have loved many people through both addiction and recovery. I have stood at funerals of students of mine, of friends of my brother, of children of my parents, friends. I grew up in suburban Philadelphia where the oxy epidemic was we were aware of it before before it was making headlines. And then in Philadelphia itself, heroin has been a major problem forever. Fentanyl has been a major problem for a long time. And overdosing, seeing people stumble through the streets high, all of those things is a regular part of my life. I personally am a supporter of needle exchange programs. I know a lot of people that aren't, and we all have very good reasons for why we are or aren't. I am a huge believer in Suboxone. We are a believer corporately in naloxone and providing it for police departments and college campuses and anyone and social workers and anyone who interacts with anyone who may either intentionally or accidentally overdose, especially as fentanyl gets more and more and more strong. So there's all of my caveats. I've been having this conversation for about 20 years. I'm very emotionally invested in it and less academically invested in it, but that is slowly changing thanks to the work of Beth and the world and some of the resources that she's opening us up to. Also, Patrick Raddenkeef's incredible book, The Empire of Pain, which his work exclusively focuses on the Sacklers, the Sackler family, who are the people who invented OxyContin, even not medically, but culturally, because of how they did it. This book kind of talks about them for sure, but it doesn't talk about Arthur really. And Arthur is the guy he started, cut his teeth with Pfizer, made $1 gajillion on tetramycin and Valium, promoting them for medical companies, and then went on to found Purdue Pharma and took all of the marketing tactics that he used and the way he was slippery with the law to make so much money with OxyContin. So what we really talk about in this book is Richard, who oversaw the OxyContin juggernaut that was the late 90s and early aughts, and then has since This book really focuses on the bankruptcy case that was brought against them, that was in the fall of 2021 overturned. That essentially the Sackler family could not use Purdue's bankruptcy to shield themselves from financial liability in civil lawsuits, which is great news. All that to say, let's talk about the book itself. The Sacklers are in it for sure, but the backbone of this book is the everyday folks, especially in West Virginia, Charleston, West Virginia, not Charleston, South Carolina, Charleston, West Virginia, and other parts of rural Virginia, and some other characters throughout America who are trying very, very hard to reverse the tide of the overdose crisis. A couple things I learned really quickly from this. One is that substance use disorder, SUD, is a common acronym, but that we have separated out, medical professionals have separated out opioid use disorder as a separate thing. And that is entirely because of the way that opioids rewrite your brain and body chemistry. I've got a couple pages of notes that I'd love to go through you here. One of the points that Beth makes consistently in many ways throughout this book over and over again is that the United States government spends 5 times more to incarcerate people with substance use disorder than it would cost to treat them. 5 times more. In 2019, approximately 18.9 million people that needed treatment could not get access to it. This comes up at the end of both the Dopesick book and the Dopesick miniseries. But in the United States, it is significantly easier to get high than to get help. Significantly easier. I stand by my belief that fundamentally nobody wants to be an addict. Some people may want to use, and some people may enjoy using. Nobody wants to be an addict. And if we as a country could provide ways out of addiction or preventative measures for it, things could really, really change. She talks a lot about different individuals in this book, and the point that she makes that we at Abbey Research and me as human Kristen believe so strongly is the people that can hold on to multiple ideas at once. That there are elements of this that is criminal. People who are high commit crimes. But perhaps the idea that being high is not a crime could mean that we could have harm reduction conversations and law enforcement conversations and hold them in tension. Everybody who I resonated with the most were the people who understood that, a lot of this stuff is baby steps for people. There was this great story I told Erin when we were together and I was reading this book about this knitting circle at a church. And one of the activists that Beth covers, really wanted them to knit. They were, a little knitting circle. She wanted them to knit bags to trade for people to keep their needles in, clean needles. And that was a bridge too far for these folks. Couldn't do it. But what they could do and what they were willing to do was knit bags for people to keep their Naxalone in and their Narcan. And then she introduced them to light reflecting threads so folks could find it easier in the flop houses. Lives were still saved. You met people where they are. And now they have got this really cute name, like the Hooker Club or something, because they're crocheters and they help sex workers. Anyway, that's the kind of stuff I love. I love to hear times where it's okay, you can't go there. Where can you go? And can we work together to go there? Overjoyed, overwhelmed, my favorite stuff. So just really briefly, I do want to read a couple passages, if I may, and I can because it's my video. So I want to explain what I meant before when I said that OUD should be a separate diagnostic category because of how death happens. Now, where I want you to know, I'm gonna read from this. This is page 25 in her book, and I want to be really clear that this is graphic but necessary. When a person dies from heroin or OxyContin or any other opioid, fentanyl would be in this category as well, there is not a direct line from the drug to a stopped heart. An opioid overdose is sneakier and slower moving because it begins by lulling the lungs into cozy submission. The hijacked opioid receptors cause a rush of pleasure that turns into respiratory distress. The lungs sleep so hard that as the airways constrict, the person literally forgets to breathe. Death lingers first over fingers and lips. Gurgling noises dangerously sound like snoring, but are actually death rattles. Once the oxygen starvation moves inward to vital organs, a loved one or rescue worker has 3 to 5 minutes to jolt those receptors awake and reverse the overdose before brain damage occurs and eventually death. Yikes on bikes. You literally suffocate to death because your body thinks you don't need the oxygen. Now from page 39, opioid use disorder is a chronic, reoccurring, acquired disease of brain structure and function. Let me do that again. Chronic, reoccurring, acquired disease of brain structure and function. It resides largely in the brain's reward center and parts of the prefrontal cortex that are involved in executive function and decision making. So it really doesn't matter if the opioid's legal or not, if you're in heroin or OxyContin. Your brain is flooded with far more opioids than your body can produce. Your biological tolerance will develop, some as quickly as within 5 days. Opioid receptors then become desensitized. The body's own endorphin production slows dramatically. And without the addition of these external opioids, the natural opioids stop functioning. Powerful cravings for that euphoria will eventually lead to changes in the brain, skewing the person's action. As the cravings further intensify, the drugs become even more irresistible. Then when you withdraw from it, your body literally isn't producing some of the things you need anymore. And so you get literally what they call dopesick. You will do anything to stop being dopesick. From everyone I have ever talked to, ever read, ever watched interviews with, you will do anything because your body has told you to do anything. Opioid use disorder reduces essentially humans to their lizard brain because it takes away that power to executive function and make human adult decisions. You just become your base instincts to get out of pain and stay alive. To me, that all sounds really medical. We've made it really moral because of the war on drugs, especially that President Reagan started. We've made it really moral because we don't understand it. But in terms of believing in empathy, which again is the consistent intentional choice to decision, to understand instead of assume. You can assume that somebody you see on the street that's strung out on something is a bad person or lazy or gross or, I don't know, pick a thing. Or you could seek to understand how they got there. And then even if you disagree with how they got there, they're somebody who you morally disagree with, you can still understand that what's happening to them is medical and outside of their current control. Instead of being Richard Sackler and hammering the addicts, we could be human people and walk alongside human people in medical distress. That's a lot of the genius of this book, is that it once again shows you that this is so complicated, that for some people, abstinence-only 12-step programs are super helpful. They find people where they're at. For other people, they need to be on Suboxone or something like that. For other people, they need to be on psychedelics because boop works. Like, opioid, people don't come to SUD or OUD through one measure. So getting them out of it is never going to be one measure. We have in this country given lots of incentives to employers over the years to come to companies, to come to cities. We've never really given incentives to communities to save their own people. There are places in this country where you are more likely as an adult to spend time in prison than to celebrate a holiday at home with your family. There are cities where the statistics would blow your mind. One of the things that I want to kind of close on, this review is longer than normal, but I'm trying to be a little bit more like, explanatory in what we're going on here. So for anyone who is still kind of like thinking, well, this is a lot of prescriptions, or is this diversion, which means we took the drugs from a prescription and turned it illegal. Between 2011 and 2020, prescriptions of opioids dropped by 60%, but overdose deaths doubled. And again, this goes back to like morally, we have decided that once you become addicted to something, your life doesn't matter. You become addicted to food, you become addicted to alcohol, you become addicted to drugs, you become addicted to sex, you become addicted to being a jerk. If you become addicted to gambling, if you become addicted to, things like football or reading comic books, that we are more okay with those. But the minute your addiction tips into any level of antisocial behavior, we get real pearl clutchy real fast, and we decide that you are no longer worthy of help or grace. We don't have to be like that. I really appreciated at the end of the book that Beth's friend Laura Van Der Not Lipsky, who is a trauma expert, encouraged her to end with some action steps. And there's a couple in here. She spends most of the epilogue doing them. Medicare for all is a really clear one, so that basic health care can't be politicized or precipitated on moral judgments. There's a lot of places where if you're a needle user, hepatitis A is a really big deal. And we have these programs where people can get hepatitis A treatment, but only if they stop being needle users, and crying out loud, just give them the treatment. If we had a system that would allow us to do that, would be a really big deal. We desperately need more therapists for adults, clinical licensed psychologists. There is a dearth on college campuses. There is a deficit on college campuses. There is a deficit everywhere. The American Psychological Association says that we should have about 47 therapists for every 100,000 adults. As of right now, we have 11. So that's a pretty big gap. We need a whole lot better training for doctors on what pain actually is and what addiction actually is, because they're not equipped in so many ways, especially general practitioners who end up in rural places. They're not equipped to have these conversations, as is brilliantly demonstrated by Michael Keaton's character in Emmy award-winning, Golden Globe award-winning performance in Dopesick. On page 290, she says, individuals, no matter how inspiring or selfless, cannot solve a systemic problem without sustained institutional and governmental support that replicates their heroic innovations. So all of those are systemic. There's a lot of personal things that we can do. We can advocate. We can educate ourselves. We can volunteer. We can get, really obnoxious in Congress. We can learn bankruptcy law so we understand how to hold the Sackler family accountable. And I love that, she talks about friend of the channel, Ed Bish, who lost his son to OxyContin, who taught himself bankruptcy law. He's the example that she uses. And she closes the book with the statement, learning bankruptcy law can be an act of protest or love. We need creative, complex solutions to a complex problem that has been allowed to fester for a long time. On our sister channel in the coming months, I'm going to be actually teaching Dr. Aaron the history of American pharmacology, how we've gotten to this place where a family can make billions and billions of dollars on the backs of suffering folks, and very few people appear to have a problem with it. I'm going to explain the history of the FDA and how we've gotten here with regulation or lack thereof. So keep an eye out for that for sure. And the best way to make sure that you don't miss any content is to subscribe both to this channel and the other channel. The second best way is to join our newsletter, and the link for that will be in the show notes. We talk all about empathy education, making sure that you can understand yourself and others better, so we can ask more questions, make less assumptions, and create a more cohesive planet. My name is Dr. Kristen Donnelly. This has been a major 2 thumbs up review for Raising Lazarus by Beth Macy. If you pick it up or you have read it, I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. Talk to everybody later. Bye.